Well, the Israel-Iran war is in full swing. Now with Khamenei largely eliminated, you see that overall we are starting to look at the future impacts, especially for oil at this point of time. Now, we've collated data for the last 5 decades across major wars, and to tell you about the price shocks that we've seen, especially in oil, and what it could have an impact on India also is something that we'll talk about just in the next 2 minutes. Now, amongst the Yom Kippur War, which was, of course, the Arab oil embargo back in 1973-74, you saw the price at the start was just $3 per barrel for oil, which peaked to $12, increasing by almost 300% at this point of time. When we move on and look at the Iranian Revolution as well, there was a volatility of almost 179% change in oil as in this particular war, while in terms of the Iran-Iraq war, you saw a volatility of almost 25%, which shows you that the price at the start of a war, the peak prices, as well as where it ends, is something that we're tracking at this point of time. You also seen that during the Gulf War, there was major volatility at this point of time, 141% change in oil prices compared to its peak. And while this did retreat to $21 per barrel at the end, there was that impending price volatility during this point of time. You also see that, the Iraq war was something that we also saw a 40% change in terms of prices. In the Libyan civil war, they peaked and crossed the 100 mark at this point of time with a 32% change. And even after the war, the price at the end was much higher than from where it started off. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, that's the other and the most latest one at this point of time, where the price was roughly about $75 per barrel and went all the way up to $130 per barrel, which shows you the extent of the volatility in price even in the recent price trends. A 75% change, and we are still seeing that while it has retreated from those highs, the volatility does continue for a lot of other nations, especially India, which have diversified their oil purchases as well. Now, when you look at over the past 50 years, we've put out this data that almost a 25 to 300% volatility that we've seen across the wars, and oil overreacts first and then tends to come back to its mean reversion in that sense. So you do see that trade flows do get adjusted over time, but you see the volatility that it comes with the geopolitical risk as well. Now, at the start of the Russian-Ukraine war, you did see roughly about $100 per barrel which was the cost of oil at that time. Now, it structurally kept the crude at that point of time very stable at around $100, which was quite expensive given that it was trading at around $75 per barrel before the war started. But whilst briefly going to about $120 per barrel, it did retreat to under 65 before this particular Iran-Iraq war has largely gone through as well. So for Iran and Israel, this continues to be at a time in terms of volatility, and as we track the India impact now because overall in the global oil production, Iran's strength has actually diminished quite a bit to just 3% of the global production. But the Strait of Hormuz, which we've been talking about, has almost 50% of India's oil which comes in through that strait. So when you look at the India impact next now, it consistently talks about, that India hardly imports anything from the Iranian regime, roughly around 2.6 million barrels per day, which has gone up from last year, but very significantly lower compared to our other nations that we take the oil from. Now, roughly about 50% of India really gets it from the Strait of Hormuz, and hence that's the bigger impact of this impending war that we are seeing. Currently, a lot of dependence was on Russia before this particular war. India imports roughly around 2.6 million barrels per day from the Strait of Hormuz out of the 5.2 that comes in on a regular basis. And increase was largely owing to reducing this dependence, which we saw for Iraq as well. Now, roughly 14 million tons comes from Qatar as well as from UAE, and that's via the Strait of Hormuz, which becomes the key important point as well. So that's largely the data that we put together for you in terms of the volatility of oil prices over the last 5 decades and multiple wars is important of how we start off Monday and especially get some cues on Sunday night from the Brent crude volatility, amongst others.